Disclaimer: the views and opinions expressed on Nerdy Talk do not reflect those of Anime Herald. Due to strong language, listener discretion is advised. Now sit back and enjoy the show. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to Nerdy Talk, the only podcast coming to you directly from Mega Tokyo. I'm Mike Ferreira, joined tonight by Anthony Simpson and Matt Brown. And tonight we have a special guest, Robert Woodhead from AnimEigo is going to be talking to us about the recent Bubblegum Crisis Kickstarter. First of all, let's say welcome to the show. Thanks again for joining us. It was a pleasure last time, and we're happy to have you on.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Absolutely. And this time around, before when we last had you on, we were kind of right in the thick of things when the Kickstarter was in full motion. And I kind of wanted to take a little time to maybe do a bit of a postmortem, kind of discuss how things went and what your observations and the like were during that whole production process.
Okay, well, I'll give you a brief overview, but I think we should then dive right into your questions because I think what we'll find is that the bizarre tangents that we get onto that come off of those questions are going to be much more interesting than me just blathering on. Basically, this will be a bit of recap for those who listened to the earlier podcast, but I wanted to use this project as a way to experiment both with a new releasing model, but also with a new production model. And in particular, I wanted to get the backers as deeply involved as possible with the actual production process, because it rapidly became clear to me that in this day and age when everything is downloadable on torrent and digital, what is the value of digital bits that can be infinitely copied? In order for companies like mine to be successful and be able to do interesting things, had to find a way to deal with that issue. And of course, the big media companies have tried legal stuff and all sorts of other sort of traditional approaches to dealing with this. But, those kind of things are just like not practical for a little company like ours. So it occurred to me to try something a little bit different. And the actual best metaphor for it didn't actually come to me until sometime later in the production process. But the way I like to explain it to people is that you can copy a Disney movie, but you can't copy the experience of going to Disneyland. So what I've tried to do with this project was give everybody who backed the project an opportunity to go to Disneyland, to do as much or as little as they wanted to do to contribute to the project, whether it was just by providing a bit of feedback or voting or whatever, or actually, as some of the people did, spend hundreds of hours working on subtitles, which is why the set has subtitles in English, French, German, Italian, Japanese, and Finnish. I mean, there are only about a dozen backers in Finland, and yet they got their own subtitles because one of them literally spent probably 300 or 400 hours working on that part of the project. So I think that on that level, it was very successful, and a lot of the things that people like most about the set were originated as suggestions from some of the backers. The way we did some of the packaging, choices on shipping, all those sort of things. They were all because of the feedback and back and forth between myself and actual people who had put their money up in the beginning and had stayed involved with the project. And I'm definitely 100% sure that it came out a lot better than it would have if I had just gone into a hole for 6 months and worked on it myself. Because some of the decisions that the backers wanted would not have been the things that I wanted to do. Um, at the same time, it turned out to be a lot more work than I thought it was going to be. I'd like to caveat that with that I think that work was totally worth it. But that's one of the reasons the set was delayed for a few months. For example, we literally had so much on those Blu-rays that we broke the authoring system several times and it took us a while to find workarounds that let us actually keep all the content we wanted to put on those discs on the discs. So the overall postmortem is I think it worked great. I want to, on the next project we do, maybe not go so insanely overboard in terms of the amount of sort of options we provided to people, because I think there is sort of a sweet spot. I think we probably went a little bit insane on this one, but we had to do that in order to figure out where the sweet spot was. But I definitely want to do other projects like this in the future where the backers definitely help mold the final product, because I think that provides something that every even if they haven't watched it in like 3 or 4 years, they'll just see the box in their shelf and they'll remember that, hey, I did something that, my name's on this. I did something related to it. And I think that's a really cool feeling.
Yeah, definitely. I was one of those people that was kind of the craziest in the forums, and it was like, sometimes I'm amazed that you guys can make heads or tails out of what was coming out of it, because there was some times where it seemed like you were trying to herd cats.
Well, actually, the cats tended to herd themselves to a certain extent. I mean, yeah, there are some things that people suggested that just weren't practical, but by and large, either other people or, if necessary, I would just explain, why there's a problem there. And sometimes there were things that at first glance would seem impractical, and then I just they kind of mull around in the back of my head, and finally I figured out, well, yeah, actually, it turns out there is sort of a way I could do that. These would often be just little things that at first seemed impractical, but we ended up doing. And the other weird thing about this project was that because people kept signing up after the Kickstarter was over, we actually collected almost like 50% additional after the Kickstarter. And so our budget kept increasing, and we kept having to go back and say, like, oh, geez, what can we add to the set? Which is why why the biggest controversy that we had in this was that when we voted originally on, what to include in the set, there were definitely two kind of parties, almost like Republicans and Democrats. There were the people who were the contentocrats who said, I don't care if it comes wrapped in a bucket of shit so long as everything possible is on those discs. And then there were the packagerians who said, I don't care if the discs are shit so long as the packaging looks awesome. And when the voting came out and they basically tied, and so each one got like a little bit of what they were expecting to get, they were all going like, how could you possibly vote for like including the comic book? And and the other guys are saying, well, how could you possibly vote for like putting it in a box? But at the end of the day, because the budget kept ramping up, everybody got everything they wanted. So it became a total non-controversy.
Everybody won.
Yeah, basically. And I think there was also a little bit of a snowball effect, because when after the first couple times when it happened, when I went back and said, okay, well, we got enough money now, so we're going to add this, I think people started telling their friends, and then more people signed up because every time I posted an update saying, "Oh yeah, we just decided to add this," there would be like a huge spurt in signups, which then of course would fund the next thing. And so it got a little insane towards the end because at the end I was just trying to think like, what can I possibly add to this?
Is there anything that you would have liked to see added that just wasn't feasible or couldn't be done, or
Uh, we got pretty much everything we wanted. There really wasn't that much more that we could have done. The one thing that I want to do better next time is handling shipping for international backers because they some of them got hit with some customs fees, which is expected, but there was probably after the project got to a certain size, there was probably a way to do things like ship in bulk to the UK and then fulfill into Europe to avoid those customs fees and maybe save people a few bucks. But that's more of a logistical thing versus an actual product content thing. But even so, that's one of the things I really learned on this project was I learned a lot more about the sort of worldwide logistics versus just shipping stuff inside the U.S. and Canada, which is what we've typically done in the past.
Yeah, I was only kind of aware of the ridiculousness of Canadian customs, but I was maybe a little bit surprised to find out how crazy the costs got for those all over Europe, Belgium, the Norway, Germany, etc.
Actually, Norway was pretty good. Norway, nobody got dinged. The three countries that are absolutely great for anime fans are Australia, New Zealand, and Norway because they have high personal exemptions, so they never have to pay anything. Canada is an interesting case because even though technically there's supposed to be a fair amount of tax, only 5% of the Canadian backers actually got charged it. Who knows? I don't understand why. Maybe it's just because it was Christmas, but that's what happened.
Oh, maybe it was Czech Republic I was thinking of. I looked at your list of European countries and what they were doing to the backers, and I found it very interesting. But frankly, I'm having trouble remembering it all.
Yeah, I'm actually taking all of that information and I've actually started building a spreadsheet to figure out costs for the next projects because that sort of nerdy stuff is just like stuff I really get off on. But one of the bizarre things is because the enforcement rate on these packages going into Canada is so low, it may actually be the best bet is to just tell the Canadian backers, I'll charge you a couple of bucks insurance, and if you get dinged, I'll pay it for you. So I effectively self-insure against Canadian customs. But of course, if I do that, there'll be an APB out on Canadian customs looking for our packages.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's interesting. When you consider streaming, they don't have those sorts of problems, but then there's the problem of being able to get the licensing for that period.
Yep. And streaming is becoming a bigger part of the business, but it's physical stuff is still, where you pay your mortgage, basically.
Absolutely, yeah. The streaming is also a lot more technically inclined, like in terms of very finicky in terms of licenses. I've noticed because I've seen, like Matt said, there's countless countless services where they'll have a show that's available, say, across the globe outside of the U.S., except for the U.S., or they're only allowed to stream in the U.S. and then everything else gets blocked out. So it's one of those things where it's a very murky water at this point. It seems like they're still kind of, while it's growing, they're still kind of feeling out how to best approach it.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a learning curve, and licensors are very conservative about these sort of things, which is, one reason why I think we haven't seen quite as many Kickstarters and crowdfunding style projects um, as we would like. Is that um, it takes time to um, convince the licensors in Japan that this is a good model for them. And hopefully, projects like Bubblegum Crisis, where we took something that's, my goodness, what, 30 years old now, I guess, pretty close, and successfully re-released it, and everybody liked it, and the licensor, just got a really nice Christmas present from a title that is basically deep in the back catalog right now. So, that's the kind of message that I'm taking to when we talk to people in Japan, is that there's life in your back catalog so long as you've still got the film, so that you can make an HD transfer.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you just heard a thud, that was my mic falling. Sorry about that.
Even very recent series, there's these curious disappearances of maybe not the master film, but the media and effects tracks and things like that. It's seems like there are some companies across the pond that don't keep track of their materials too well, because maybe they don't. I don't know. Maybe they don't think they're going to be valuable 20 years in the future.
Well, it's partially that. I mean, my favorite story about that was we licensed a film once, and I won't say which one it is, to protect the guilty. And about a month after we did the license, they said, "Oh, about the music and effects tapes. Well, there was a flood, and." Basically, they literally had a flood out a storage room that had the music and effects tapes in it, and they didn't have them anymore, which was a big problem because this was something that we were going to dub, and so we actually started asking around, and we actually looked up everybody in the ending credits who had worked on the audio and called them up. And we found one of the editors, the sound editors, who was a pack rat and had saved a copy of everything he'd ever worked on. And he had a copy of the music and effects for this film, but it was on a tape format that nobody ever used before, and the tape was quite old. So we literally had to, not only, after we got his tapes from him, we had to not only find a machine that would play them, but we realized we were basically only going to get one shot at it, because probably it was going to start falling apart after one run through the machine. But we managed to get it.
Yeah, that must have felt like an amazing victory.
We figured we had about a 25% chance of getting the audio and being able to do a dub of that film, and we were able to do it. That all credit goes to the sound engineers who, first of all, the sound engineer who saved the stuff, and second of all, the sound engineer who was able to recover it. But yeah, I mean, that sort of stuff. I mean, materials problems is always a huge problem. There's a title that right now that I would like to do a Kickstarter for, but we're having a big problem finding the original materials, because the company was supposed to have it, went out of business, and it can be a real sort of detective job to find the material sometimes.
I can definitely imagine it. I mean, this is one of those cases where if Murphy's Law hits, it hits hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, even Star Wars had issues with the masters when they tried to re-release it, so nobody's exempt.
Well, analog stuff, it does degrade over time, unfortunately.
Now, you mentioned, I'm sure both Mike and I kind of had questions around the subtitling and the technical issue you faced with that. It feels like, or it seems like there's a kind of story there about breaking, how you broke the authoring software. And maybe there isn't, I don't know. But did you have anything more to tell on that? Did it seem unreasonable that the authoring software broke in that way?
I think we were pushing things to the bleeding limit, and when you do that, sometimes you get cut. I mean, not only do we have 6 languages on this Blu-ray set, but we have each language comes in 2 variants. There's the color variant and the monochrome variant, because some people like the color titles, and some people like the more black and whitey titles. So we decided, why choose? Well, we'll just put them both on. I mean, we can just spit out those. Once we have one, we can just spit out the other ones, just by pressing a button. But it turns out that you have several issues with Blu-rays. One of which is that your total bandwidth for subtitles, there are some limits to it. So you want to clip your subtitles to sort of a bounding box around each title to minimize the amount of data that actually has to go on the disc. They're all PNG images, by the way. But there's another problem, which is if you want to do the kind of overlapping subtitle style that AnimEigo likes to do, all of your subtitles have to be clipped to the same size throughout the entire subtitle sequence, in effect, for each episode. Which meant that if we had subtitles at both the top and the bottom of the screen, that box surrounding the subtitles had to be big for every subtitle in the entire sequence. So we had to go through and restructure our subtitles so that we didn't put stuff at the top of the screen anymore, which is what, if you look at episodes 2 and 3, the opening credits, you'll see that that's what we did, that we moved down the some of the credit subtitles down towards the middle bottom of the screen. And that's all to make that little box a little bit smaller. But then we had an issue because of the Finnish subtitles, because the gentleman who did the Finnish subtitles really wanted to have one of his tracks just be the dialogue, but the other track be dialogue plus a lot of explanatory captions, because fans in Finland, don't may not be able to, for example, read as much English as like we can. So a lot of things in the background they might not get, which is perfectly reasonable. But that meant that he couldn't reduce his bounding boxes. So we had to figure out if we could let him have his big size, but keep everybody else small, and then and still get it to within the bandwidth limitations that we had, which we were able to do. Except that we had the problem of the ending credits. Okay, and we'd been subtitling the ending credits and just putting up the subtitles on top of those, but those subtitles would have to have big bound boxes. So we had to split the ending credits subtitles from the main program subtitles and effectively make the ending credits sort of a little mini program. And because they were so big, we had to go from 12 subtitle tracks down to 6, because the ending credits were all they looked the same between the color and the monochrome. Except that switching between 12 tracks and 6 tracks and then going back to 12 tracks when you go to the next program caused a bunch of really bizarre programming issues on the Blu-ray, which is why now what you see on the actual program is you see when the program ends, you see the regular Japanese credits with no subtitles except for the song, and then it goes to a scroll of the translated subtitles. And the reason for that was that we had this programming conflict that didn't let us do the standard kind of subtitling style we would usually do for ending credits on those things. And figuring out all of this and figuring out all the workarounds basically cost us 2 months. And then, on top of all of that, we ran into a bug in the authoring system that every so often, when it was compiling all the subtitles, it would run into one particular subtitle and crash and not tell you which subtitle it was. So out of the 600 subtitles times 12 tracks in a particular episode, one of them was causing it to go kaboom. And figuring out which subtitle, at first we tried figuring out what subtitle it was by like subtitling the first half, subtitling the second half, but that didn't always work. And finally we figured out that what we had to do was run the subtitles through a subtitle compression system or PNG compression system. And for some reason, if you set it to particular settings, it would generate, and if you got this problem, you could go to your sort of alternate versions that had gone through this compression, which, by the way, for all the subtitles, took a day and a half to run. And you would be able to compile it. And that took us another month. And this was all because of the huge number of subtitles we had on the set.
Yeah, it's starting to sound like the volume of subtitles might not have been the root cause, but yeah, as you said, you definitely stressed the system, and that's very fascinating. The kinds of issues
Let me put it to you this way: Casey Mershon, who did the authoring for this, we gave him combat pay for this one. Because it took a lot longer than we thought it was going to take. And it went through a lot more iterations. And we were really paranoid about the final result and doing the checking on the final result. And I got to tell you, I was absolutely sweating bullets when the final discs came back and they got sent out to everybody that somebody was going to find a problem.
Thankfully, from the sound of things, that hasn't happened.
So far, no, nobody's really found a problem, and I think we've had about 4 or 5 discs that were just glitched, because of a piece of dust during the manufacturing, and I just had to replace the disc. But in terms of somebody actually finding a programming problem that causes discs just not to work on particular players or stuff like that, nobody's found any of those yet. Or at least they haven't told me. And if you have found one, don't tell me. I don't want to know.
Well, kind of on a related note, you mentioned the fellow who did the Finnish subtitles and how much time he put in. Yep. I was reading one of your later posts on the Kickstarter, and I don't want to say you seemed dismayed that some folks spent that much time on it, but definitely seemed a bit conflicted. Did you want to talk on that at all? Because these people are your backers, and they wound up putting in a lot of their own time, which of course they wanted to do, but I don't know. Any thoughts?
Well, I don't think I'm really conflicted about it. I mean, the people that worked on it, I think they enjoyed what they did. Although, they did, get to see the sausage being made and some of the decision making that goes on behind the scenes that most people don't get to see. So I think I would try to structure things in the future so that somebody who wants to do the same sort of work is not going to have to do as much work as we did this time. I mean, a lot of things came together on this project, that meant that people had to do extra work in terms of like, oh, well, we've got to reformat these subtitles, and change their position. So, I can do that, but they need to then go and check them to make sure there are no problems and so on and so forth. So, to that extent, I think I've learned a little bit more about the limits of what my ambition should be when letting people do this kind of work. On the other hand, everybody who did work on it, on the subtitles, people the guys who cleaned up the comic book, the woman who worked on doing all the sete and cleaning dust off them, they all did professional level work. That's the easiest way to say it. I mean, each one of these people could do professional work on other projects without a doubt. They all had the skills and they all worked very hard. And so that's one of the reasons in one of the updates I really told people that they really needed to give them a clap for that. And that's why I made damn sure they all now have IMDb listings. So they've got their own credits now, and that's just a little way I thought I could reward them for the work that they did.
Yeah, that's one thing that really kind of stuck with me too. Just the level of dedication that was in these people that contributed backed and participated. Like in one update, you were talking about a person that found like one specific frame that looked completely warped and traced it back to as far back as he could to find it was a filming error. Stuff like that just astounded me.
Yeah, well, in part that's just like when you have a lot of eyeballs. I mean, there's a saying in the Linux world, if you have enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow. Somebody's going to see it, and there were a couple times, like where people saw or heard, something that wasn't quite right, that everybody else was missing, and brought it up, and that's something we can fix, or that's something we can't fix. That's an original filming error.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
I mean, when we sent the discs off there's a professional service called Check Disc that will review your discs both technically and just watch them. And when I got the report back from them, they had a report that there was like one frame in the ending credits, I think of Bubblegum Crisis 1, that had like a couple of dots in the black area. And I went and looked in my original sources, and I just could not see this. And I actually finally, like a month later, was able to find it and fix it. it was actually a digital hit. But for some reason, when I was looking at my copy of it, my working copy, I couldn't see it. But when I went back to the original materials I'd gotten from Japan, there it was. I mean, you would never notice that. And one person would never notice that. I watched that scene like 100 times and never noticed it. And yet, you know, when you have enough eyes on it, somebody's going to see it and not only just see it, but think, that's funny, and rewind and take a close look. And that's actually one of the advantages of the process. I mean, you know, we sent out check discs to 5 or 6 of the backers to get some extra eyes on it. And they didn't really find anything. But they confirmed a few things. They also, you know, checked on a bunch of different players, and that really helped.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really cool. On the note of the Kickstarter, what would you say is probably the biggest lesson you learned from it, out of curiosity? Like, I know you said this whole thing was a learning experience, but what would you say your biggest takeaway was?
That's actually a good question. I mean, there are lots. I mean, I learned a lot about optimizing the process of doing, you know, things like the logistics and shipping. I mean, we'd done kind of these kind of things before, like with Macross and Yaura and titles like that. So, you know, I had a good idea of like how to do things, but you know, just figuring out really, really subtle stuff on how to do the shipping and things like that. From my perspective as kind of somebody who just likes to optimize everything, that was very interesting and useful. In terms of just the more public aspects of the process, I was able to explore the parameter space, I guess would be the right way to put it. In that, like, I tried as many different things on this project as I could in terms of different ways to involve people and different ways to see what people wanted and how they would react to things. And so I think I have a much more focused idea of what works and what doesn't work. For example, on our next project, we won't have any early bird pricing, you know, like discount pricing for the first like 50 or 100 people to sign up. Because I just came to the realization, both from the feedback I gotten on the project, and also from reading around, that I should just be giving the early bird pricing to everybody. Just figure out what that should be, and then just set the pricing that way. You know, I think the next project I'll probably simplify the number of support levels considerably, and depending on the project, I'll have a much better idea in advance of what kind of aspects of the production are going to be open to backers to work on. You know, for example, if I only have North American rights to the title, then, you know, the subtitling issue in terms of people working on subtitles will mostly go away, although there might be like a possibility for doing Spanish subtitles or something like that. But I think one area that'll open more to people is packaging design, because there's a lot of people who are really Photoshop wizards out there. So I think something I would do right from the beginning is make sure that anybody who wants to try their hand at packaging design can get the templates and all the high resolution images, you know, right at the beginning of the project, so that they can start messing around with stuff.
Very cool. Very cool. Very cool.
I don't know. I think from my perspective, the just the ability for backers to review the subtitles is definitely a win. You know, even if they don't find anything, having extra eyes on that part of the process is always good, I think.
Yeah, actually, that was on the Bubblegum Crisis project. I was limited by the fact that I had permission to let the people actually working on the subtitles who'd signed non-disclosures get advanced copies of the subtitles. And in fact, we basically, I think I would do like sort of reduced resolution versions for them, like 640 by 360 or something, with their name stamped on it, and just upload them, and so they could check them. And that worked really well. But one thing I'm definitely want to do on future projects, if I can get permission, and it may be difficult, is expand that basically to everyone, so that whenever we have a subtitle work in progress, we'll literally post it for download somewhere, put it up on a private Vimeo account or something like that, so that people can go in and watch it and directly give us the feedback. Of course, then there'll be people complaining about my grammar choices. So there'll be a downside to that, I'm sure, but and also complaining about my jokes. But that would be definitely a way I think more people could get involved at a level of depth that's comfortable for them, rather than just like throwing yourself into the deep end and you're going to sink or swim. So that kind of thing, I definitely want to work towards that, and it's just a matter of convincing the licensor that it's a good idea.
Absolutely. And this is a bit more of a selfish thing, but any chance you can hint at what your next project's going to be?
I wish I could. We've got like 3 or 4 things that we're actively talking about doing. One of them I know I can do, so long as we can find the damn materials, and they're trying to find the materials in Japan right now, and hopefully I could get we could get an email like next week saying, "Hey, we found them," and if so, that'd be really cool, because that'd be a title that I think people would like, but it's also a title that's never come out on HD. So it doesn't have an HD transfer yet. And one of the things, for a title like that, one of the things I'd like to do is have a stretch goal where if it gets up to a certain amount, we don't just do an HD transfer, we do an UHD transfer in 4K resolution. And we might be able to arrange something where backers get a chance to stream some of it in UHD, which I think would be kind of cool.
That sounds fantastic.
It really does.
Yeah, well, I mean, is that kind of thing? That's a neat thing about Kickstarters and crowdfunding in general, is that you can look at the economics and say, well, if we get this number of people, then yeah, we can do this sort of basic project. But if we get this number of people, the economies of scale are such that now we have some extra budget. What could we use for that budget? And doing a UHD film scan versus an HD film scan, well, that's an extra $10,000, but we've got it. So that might be a cool thing to do. And we'll set a stretch goal. If we get 4K backers, we'll do a 4K scan. I think that would be a really kind of a cool stretch goal. And it would also allow us to explore the possibilities of doing these kind of titles in UHD, which, might be a little bit too early, really. But, it's still a fun thing to try. And if you're not going to have fun, why do it?
Yeah, definitely. I have well, this may be neither here nor there, but where did you get the idea for the challenge coin?
I'd seen them before, and actually, I play a game called EVE Online, and I was a member of their Council of Stellar Management, which is the elected group that goes off to Iceland to yell at the developers. And so I went to their convention that they have in Iceland every year, and there were a couple of in-game groups that had done their own challenge coins for their group. And I thought that those looked really cool. And so when I was looking for an interesting kind of extra goodie, that came to mind. And I've actually got one with me right here. I keep it right by my computer. And what I like it for is the fact you can use it as a decision coin, because one side says submit and the other side says resist. So it's like, do I want to have an extra ice cream tonight? Submit. Okay, good. It works really well.
Submit is the only suitable answer.
Actually, yeah, I've got mine is actually a double coin. It's got the two submit sides glued together.
Gotta have the Largo loaf.
Yeah. Actually, though, I think the thing that came out even better than the coin was the keychain.
I was going to mention that too. I collect keychains in general, and this is so good that I think I'm going to use it as my normal keychain. It's very good quality, I have to say.
Yeah, it was done by the same people that did the coin. And, this was an example of like, oh, we've got extra money. What do we do with it? And so coming up with the keychain idea, which it is basically, it's an embossed coin that's then, stamped to cut out the edges to form the keychain shape. And the way they took the two-dimensional original image of the 80 police shield and turned it into a three-dimensional embossing is just, I could not believe how good that came out. Yeah. I mean, my hat is totally off to them. And the interesting thing is, as you know, the basic backers got a chance to choose either the coin or the keychain. They had to choose one of the two. Since the end of the project, since we're just selling our extra copies on the website, the sales of basic sets are about 60-40 keychain over coin.
I believe it. The keychains are gorgeous.
So, and that is one aspect of the project that like, I did it because I thought it would be cool, and it turned out to be cooler than I thought it would be.
While I'm fanboying out, there was another thing I noticed that I was looking through the set of postcards, and one of them looked really familiar, and I dug my Bubblegum Crisis vocal collection out of storage and realized that it was the same cover. I thought that was great.
Yeah, basically, well, I mean, you're responsible for that because people voted for what images they wanted to do. They wanted to use on those cards.
Nice.
Just going through the set, I don't mind me fanboying out for a second there. I just thought the entire presentation, entire set was incredible. From the reversible covers, the tastefully laid out like names on the back of the cases, even just the way the music videos were presented, it really came out wonderfully. I have to get my hat off to everyone that contributed to this one.
Yeah, well, if you go and look in some of the project updates about the feedback we got on the early versions of the packaging and how it evolved, and also on the forum, there was a thread where people were putting up like different variants of like how to do the names, and I also got people sending me stuff directly. You can see how the feedback from the backers caused that whole thing to evolve and become more refined. And that's a perfect example of how this process allowed me to kind of like tune the final result to what the backers really wanted as opposed to what I thought they wanted. Um, like when I do the next set, I'm definitely going to do the reversible covers. But I think one of the things I'm going to do is have one that is a more traditional type of product cover. But the other one will be a much more extreme kind of like art cover, if you will, where it's definitely showcasing the art. Um, I want to find a way to extend what we did in this set, um, but also accommodate. There was a minority of people who perhaps would have preferred a more traditional cover, so I want to address those concerns at the same time. And I think that for example, I'm pretty sure that there'll be a lot of backers who will want to try and work on on the cover artwork and the disc art for future projects. And I think having like two very different sets of constraints or lack of constraints in terms of the art cover um, will appeal to different people. And I think I'm really looking forward to seeing like what people think these kind of things should actually look like, as opposed to what I or other people in the industry or what tradition has shown. These are the way things look. I think that's going to be an interesting experiment to do, and I may even do something crazy like ship like a single disc with two sets of reversible covers, so that you've got like four things to throw to put in there. I'm actually checking right now with the people who actually do the assembly to say, hey, can you slip two different sleeves into the same Amaray case? And the initial response I got back was, why would you ever want to do that?
No,
But they're starting to learn that
totally
I asked them to do really crazy things.
I totally get it.
Well, like one little thing that came up was the postcards were just slightly too big to actually fit in the cases. But it turns out that there's a different, and I didn't realize that when I initially ordered the postcards, but it turns out there is a slightly different postcard size that does fit in the cases. So next time I'll be using those. So that's a little optimization that I found along the way.
Very cool, very cool. I mean, I know I'm a little biased because I actually kind of contribute to the wiki, but I do have to say it was really, really cool to see just that one big collection of information, artwork, and everything just available for download and perusal at the end of the project.
What I liked most about it was that I was able to share all the really high resolution images. The stuff, there were some like 4K images in there that they're basically scans done of like 4x3 inch posi films, which if you're not in the industry, well, you don't see them anymore because they don't make them anymore. But that's how we got the materials, like 20 years ago. And it was nice to be able to share those with people.
Yeah, definitely. It was a really great addition, I think. And I'm glad it was kind of added to it. Yeah, I do appreciate you actually coming by to speak with us. It's a pleasure.
Well, I mean, it's talking about this kind of stuff, kind of the geeky aspects of this job is kind of a fun thing for me to do. And so I appreciate the opportunity to like blather on about this kind of stuff. But I also at the same time think that it's sort of almost part of my job, in terms of that whole thing about the the trip to Disneyland, talking to people, in podcasts, on social media, at conventions, um, about, how this stuff all comes together. That's part of the trip. It's why, you guys don't just like sit at home watching the stuff. You go to conventions and you do the cosplay and all that sort of stuff. It's because, you know, the actual anime is just part of the whole experience. And so I'm always just looking for like ways to expand that experience. Um, you know, in part because, it's what keeps me from having to have a real job, um, but also because it's fun. And I really appreciate the fact that, I get to have fun for a living.
On that note, I just have to say, keep doing what you're doing, because you guys have lived far past the point of some other companies of similar size, and you must be doing something right, right?
Well, I better, because I got two kids in college. And a couple years back, I told my youngest son, if you really hate me, just get accepted into the most expensive college in the country. And he, like, about a year ago, he came and showed me a letter and said, "Mission accomplished."
Before that, did he say challenge accepted?
Yes, he actually did.
Well, thanks for coming to talk to us tonight, Robert. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
No problem.
Absolutely. We really appreciate it. And we definitely love to talk to you again once your next project gets rolling.
Oh, definitely. As soon as I'm able to announce something, I'm just going to be like all over it. Before I go, I do have one question. I want to ask you a question.
All right.
Okay. Well, I'm thinking of doing something, but I'm concerned that it might be too evil. So I'd like your honest advice. One of the things that I've promised with the Bubblegum Crisis set is that I will never sell it for less than the Kickstarter price. While we still have copies available, they are available on our website, but the price is slightly higher than what people who signed up for the Kickstarter had to pay. And I'm never going to sell it through any other company. And if our license runs out before the number of copies runs out, I'm just going to trash the remaining copies, because I think that the people who back the project, their investment ought to be protected, and they shouldn't ever have to wake up 2 years from now and, oh gee, if I'd waited 6 months, I could have gotten it for half the money. I think that's kind of like lame. But it has been suggested to me that what I ought to do is when we actually start running out, I ought to start raising the price. And as we get closer to the end, I ought to start jacking up the price, $10 here, $10 there. But I'm really conflicted about this, because that seems to be like almost too evil. On the other hand, I could be evil. It appeals to me on a, yeah. You see how conflicted I am just talking about it. It's just so deliciously bad. And injects just a lovely amount of paranoia into people. Like, I better order it right now because he might be raising the price next week. But on the other hand, I'm just concerned that it might just be just really wrong to do that. So what do you think?
It sounds like you're worried about being your own scalper.
Well, that's what, if you look on eBay with all the discontinued AnimEigo titles, you see them being sold there for just insane prices. Okay? So, that seems to be what happens. The products that go out of license sort of have this afterlife. So it occurs to me just to like get a head start on it. And so like, I've got 100 copies left. So boom, the price goes up $10. And when I've got 10 copies left, but I can't at this point bring myself to do it. But if there's just a huge outcry from the current backers that yes, you must do this to screw everybody who didn't back you in the beginning, then I'd consider doing it. I probably wouldn't, but it'd be nice to know that I would be sort of supported in my evil.
Well, it's funny. It seems to me like if you didn't have an explicit reason for doing it, then market economics kind of explain what you're doing anyway, and you don't have to worry about it.
Well, yeah, I mean,
once you have a reason, it almost seems like, well,
Well, you see, here's the thing. I mean, we were talking a little bit about before the podcast started about economics and how the older I get, the more things can be explained by economics. And so, like, I'm a huge economics fan. If you don't listen to the Freakonomics podcast, you're missing something. It's a great podcast. Okay, so from a pure economic standpoint, there are so many benefits to ratcheting up the price as effectively the remaining stock goes down. Okay, not just in terms of maximizing the amount of moolah that I make out of the remaining copies that I've got, which of course, remember, I got those college fees to pay. Okay, but it also has the advantage that it will encourage people to sign up for the next Kickstarter so they can get it before the price goes up. So I've got all these things pushing me that, yes, from a pure economic standpoint, this is the right thing to do. On the other hand, I look at it and says, no, that's just too evil. I am good. I must not fall to the dark side.
I don't think it's evil. I think you make an interesting point, and maybe there's another angle to that in the sense that maybe if you're able to command those kinds of prices from your remaining stock, maybe the licensor would be interested in that data too for a future renewal, as it were.
You're sounding more and more like the Emperor, you know that? You're being very reasonable.
Hey, just look at the prices that Aniplex charges every day, and look at the prices that Pony Canyon USA is debuting with. I think starting at a low price, giving people a chance, and then ratcheting it up is hardly evil compared to just charging a high price to begin with.
I have to agree with Matt here. I mean, starting low, you're at least given the option to buy in at the early point. And then by going up, at least by going up at that point, you can't say that they didn't have the chance to purchase it when it was a more reasonable level. And like you said, it provides an incentive to buy early.
You know, if you guys ever need a second career as like apologists for evil regimes, I think and you need a reference, just let me know because I'll write you a great reference. Yeah, I really don't think I'm going to do that, but I might threaten to do it. What would be the consequences of threatening to do it but not actually carrying through on your threat? What do you think about that?
The big risk is it only works once or twice.
Yes, it's true. Yeah. You see, that's the thing. I mean, if you're going to pretend to be evil, you've got to actually be evil occasionally to like, damn. See, now you went on, you said, okay, we'll do this simple interview about anime, and now we've gotten into complex moral and ethical issues, and it's a swamp, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we should cover that in the next interview.
Yes. So Robert, how was your experiment in being evil? It went very well, Matt.
I mean, if it doesn't go well, then it wasn't worth it. So Yeah, I don't know. If it doesn't go well, maybe you should just not talk about it at all.
Yes, but if I don't talk, if I do the experiment and then don't talk about it, you'll know it didn't go well. So, you know.
Or maybe say, it didn't go well, but it felt great.
That's now, what was I telling you about being apologists for evil regimes? I mean, this is exactly the sort of, innovative thinking that they need in their spin doctors. Oh man. Yeah, we've gotten off on a really bizarre tangent here. Oh no, I just don't think I can do it, guys. I'm just too nice. That's my problem. Oh well,
Yeah.
Evil
is as evil does, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's sort of like I just don't have the guts, and that's my problem. I'm just too much of a wimp. I don't have the guts to be evil. Oh well, at least I know myself now.
I think it just comes down to, are you big enough? Get 'em all always gets away with it, obviously.
Yeah, well,
thanks for joining us. I think we should let you go. Seems like this is run its course now.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a pleasure to have you, Robert. Can't wait to talk to you again.
Okay, my pleasure. And hopefully, as soon as I get a new project going, I'll give you guys a heads up when we can start talking about it.
All right, fantastic.
That sounds awesome. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, take care, guys.
Take care. Have a great night.
Bye-bye.
All right, and that's our show, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And remember, no matter what your needs, there's a boomer for that. Remember to rate and subscribe on Stitcher and iTunes. It really helps us out. Till next time, this is Mike Ferrer signing off.
This is Anthony Simpson signing our bye-bye.
This is Matt Brown saying bye-bye, my crisis.
Have a great night, everybody.